Good morning, afternoon, evening to all of you, no matter where you are and joining this event. Welcome to the Network for Global Innovation's Global Roundtable Series, and this event is on the built environment. My name is Fred Walti. I am the CEO of the Network for Global Innovation. We are a nonprofit. We focus on slowing climate change by developing ecosystems to support clean tech entrepreneurs around the world. We work in 24 countries. We work with NGOs, incubators, accelerators, universities, cities, and so forth. And our whole focus is taking entrepreneurs and getting them into markets no matter where they are. One of our roles, and one of my favorite roles, is to facilitate the discussion around key issues and transitioning from where we are today to where we need to go to get to a net zero environment. We, therefore, in partnership with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, we have created this global roundtable series to discuss those issues. In the past, we've talked about the role of hydrogen in both storage and transportation. We've had a session or two on the transition, the special challenges that utilities and grid operators face in the transition to a net zero economy. Last month, we were talking about India. We focused exclusively on India and how it gets from a country that's 99% powered by coal to one of sustainability. And in the future, we're going to talk about subjects like future-proofing wildlands. That's the one that's coming up next. Stay tuned in this area for that. We're going to talk about grid level storage and so forth. You know, there are two characteristics that I think describe these roundtables. The first is that we tend to want to focus on the practical aspects of it. You know, most of us are entrepreneurs. We like to get things done. We're all about how do we get from here to there. And the second, of course, is the try to bring a global perspective. We at NGIN know that there are a lot of really terrific things going on around the world, and we not only want to bring those to the party, but we think there's a real benefit to sharing best practices from around the world. You know, today's roundtable on the built environment, both the current built environment and the future one, is an important one, but I think it's one that's often overlooked. Even though the built environment is responsible for about 40% of CO2's emissions, I don't see a lot of activity. I don't see a lot of mainstream discussion of the built environment. There's a lot about energy, of course, and transportation and so forth. But this is a subject that I think is so important, and we like to sometimes get out ahead of these kinds of subjects. So today is about the built environment. And I don't think there's a better person to moderate this built environment than Ben Stapleton, who is the executive director of the United States Green Building Council. Ben, it's always good seeing you. Ben and I have known each other for quite a long time, since probably 2011, when I founded the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator in the downtown part of Los Angeles. Ben at that time was working for a large real estate development company. He was in charge of their sustainable real estate practice. Even today, that would be kind of a leaning forward position. 10 years ago or 11 years ago, it was really leaning forward. So Ben has been part of and had an interest in the sustainability of the built environment for a very long time. Somehow I convinced Ben to join LACI and to lead the creation of the La Cret's Innovation Campus, which essentially we raised $50 million. We had a 60,000 square foot brick building, and we needed to make that into an innovation center, state of the art, not only for clean tech entrepreneurs, but we wanted to walk the walk as well and make it a sustainable building. And so Ben led that project successfully, of course. La Cret's is one of the best examples of that, I think, in the world, recognized certainly. And he's operated that building for quite a long time. So Ben has business experience. He has the construction side of it, the operations side, and we've known each other for quite a long time. So Ben, I would like to welcome you and turn this over to you to moderate this panel.
Yeah, I just was saying, Fred, it's always a pleasure to participate with you in anything that you're doing. I've been operating at this odd intersection of real estate, sustainability, innovation now for quite some time. And before I was just a crazy green real estate guy. Now I'm just the green real estate guy. But it's quite all right. It's quite all right. And this is an incredibly important topic. We have a great set of panelists today and really going to talk about some complicated issues. And I think the challenge with buildings in general is that they're complicated, and it's difficult for people to kind of understand what's happening behind the walls, in the materials, all those sorts of things. So I'm going to share my screen for a moment and just provide a little bit of framing for our conversation before I introduce our panelists or have them introduce themselves. So I borrowed these slides from Europe with their full permission because it's really hard to explain decarbonizing buildings and where the carbon comes from. And I found that Arab has done probably the best job I've seen of representing this. So I just want to frame this for a moment. Fred mentioned that carbon in buildings is roughly 40% of our emissions. And so it's really broken down into two sectors. So there's the operational carbon, which is, as you can see here, roughly 28% of emissions. And then there's the embodied carbon. So what goes into building materials and construction, the manufacturing that goes into that. So when you combine those two, you get to roughly 40% of the emissions. So the interesting thing here, and we're going to dive into some of these topics today, is that if we're going to squeeze down that operational carbon, we have a set of levers we can pull. We can look at efficiency. We can make sure we're making that grid more renewable as we move forward. And that's going to help us really reduce the emissions from that operational carbon sector. Then we also have that embodied carbon. We're not going to talk about that as much today, but that's also incredibly important. And we've seen just a huge movement around transparency in materials and actually getting information about what's in those materials and the emissions that went into them over the last few years. That's really allowed us to make progress very, very quickly around embodied carbon. And that really looks at supply chain, that looks at circular economy. How do we reuse our existing buildings? So these are all important things to consider. And then, really why this is such a critical conversation today is that if you look at this slide here, we all see these projections about, how do we get to, 1.5, 2 degrees? How do we maintain where we're at in this battle against climate change? Well, if we're trying to get to net zero by 2050, we have this critical inflection point at 2030. I often talk about this as the critical decade in our fight against climate change, and buildings are a huge part of that. The buildings that we're designing now and that we're building now are the buildings that are going to be operational in 2050. We all know that there's buildings that have been around for hundreds of years that we've seen and are part of. And so the reality is the work we're doing today is going to impact what that future looks like. And I actually love this little graphic down here where it has the design, the site, so that's sort of the construction and the operation, because that's not something we think about with buildings. Again, those buildings that are being designed now, if you look at that bottom in 2020, that takes several years. Then there's construction. So those buildings are actually going to be on the market into this decade and are going to be, really setting the pathway and the baseline for what we're going to have around emissions going forward. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of framing. We're not going to throw a bunch of presentations at you today, but I think it's important for those, especially if you're not working in this space, to kind of understand what we're really looking to talk about and dive into. So today we're going to focus a bit on the operational carbon. I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves and talk about their role here a little bit. So without further ado, David, if you want to go first and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you, Ben. Thanks, Fred. Good morning, everyone. Good morning here in Southern California. It might be good afternoon or good evening or good night somewhere else. So it's really exciting to do a global panel like this where we really span the time zones, because this is so important to the entire world. So really happy to be here. I'm the Director of Efficiency Solutions at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. I run the energy efficiency programs, and I help, and I run those as a supply side resource to the Department of Water and Power. We see energy efficiency as foundational to achieving a broader decarbonization of our grid, as well as the built environment itself. We're the largest municipally owned utility in the country. We serve 4 million population, which is about 1.4 million customer accounts. That's quite large for a municipally owned utility, but it's a great opportunity for us because we're still what's considered vertically integrated in the industry, which means we're responsible for the majority of our generation, our transmission, our distribution, and of course, customer service and helping our customers in myriad ways that I'll talk about a bit more. But that gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of a lot of responsibility, but also flexibility in how we approach decarbonizing our grid, as well as decarbonizing helping our customers decarbonize their buildings as well. Thank you.
Thank you, David. It's always great to see you as well. And LADWP has been such a leader, really, as far as, especially as a municipal utility here. It's great to have you with us today. Patti, if you could introduce yourself next.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Patti Romero-Lankao. I'm an environmental sociologist, and I'm helping LADWP do something super innovative. We are engaging with communities to make sure that the transition to clean energy is also equitable and is also inclusive. I have done work with communities on energy transitions all over the world, and I'm really proud and excited to be part of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Patti. And you couldn't be more spot on. Especially in this fight against climate change, we need to make sure that we can all really be prepared for this future. And I think we can all see the potential for this to slide into a situation where it's more of the haves and the have-nots as we deal with climate change. So really appreciate your work here. Michael, if you could go next.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Hello, everybody. I say hello because it's late afternoon here in Berlin, Germany. I have nearly my whole work done for today, and I'm suffering for some beer or something. But I'm really happy to see all of you and to get in a discussion with you. My background is I'm heading the Berlin Energy Agency now since years. The agency celebrates the 30th anniversary this year. So we are initiated by the government of Berlin. We are doing a lot of programs around energy, around renewables, around energy efficiency and energy conservation, of course. And we are quite well known and in that we are doing some own investments. We run own systems, very small site, decentralized microgrids based on renewables as well on CHP. Really close to building sector, mostly close to the housing sector, but as well to small parts of commercials. We are in a collaboration with LADWP since some years, and I'm really happy that we are in a conversation on this way, because COVID did interrupt our physical meetings so hard that it's a pleasure to be here on a Zoom platform together with you.
Thank you, Michael. And Michael and I were just saying before the panel started, we actually hosted a roundtable on energy storage with LADWP and the Berlin Energy Agency back in March of 2020, which some of you may recall was a significant month for a variety of reasons in the world. And I recall thinking this is the last international event I will probably do for a very long time. And that was actually with Michael. So it's good to see you again. Good to see you again. So you really want to dive into the heart of the conversation here. And I'm going to start with you, David, but especially because I think your perspective is so valuable in the work you do in looking at this issue. But what do you see as some of the main challenges in decarbonizing the built environment?
Thanks, Ben. Well, there's a lot. I mean, I appreciate the focus on operating, and I just wanted to note that it is very important to call out the embodied portion of it, because it really does point to the need for being thoughtful and frankly conservative about what we do with what already exists, as opposed to this idea that, well, I'll just tear it down and start over new, or I'll just junk this car and get the the latest, the newest one. That's a huge issue, and it's going to be even more so as we move into deeper into electrification of transportation and the whole battery discussion. So I don't want to give that short shrift, but understand we are focused here on operating. But I did want to highlight that the existing and the embodied is a major factor that I think will warrant further focus and create some really good opportunities as well in the future. But as far as so focusing on the existing built environment, I appreciate Fred's statistic that 40% of the GHG emissions are related to buildings, and that's exactly right. And it warrants kind of drilling down into that. There's the embodied piece, of course, but there's also, on the operating side, there's the electricity that's supplied to buildings. And then there's also the carbon emissions that originate within the operations of the buildings. So, excuse me. So those two are worth distinguishing. If your buildings exists within a regulatory regime that recognizes that and imposes decarbonization requirements on the electric side. So, for example, us in California, we're mandated by the state to decarbonize the electric grid by 2045, and the city of Los Angeles has taken on a goal to do it by 2035. So if you're a building owner who wants to decarbonize your building, the electric side actually is quote being handled by the electric utility. Now that still means you should absolutely do energy efficiency, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. But the responsibility to decarbonize the electric grid has been established as falling upon the load serving entities, the LSEs in California, which in our case is the Department of Water and Power. So for a building owner operator, what does that leave? It leaves the on-site sources of carbon, which is typically the combustion of natural gas. Other areas of the country, it might be heating oil or it might be propane, but in any case, it's an on-site combustion of a fossil fuel. And so that's where we're really focused on when we talk about decarbonization of buildings, because we're working on the grid. We've got the whole LA 100 strategy to get us there by 2035, decarbonized grid. But how do we decarbonize the buildings end uses themselves? And so we think in terms of there's four main end uses within most buildings. This is non-industrial. That's a whole nother area. Industrial is really going to be tough on this. But within regular buildings, residential, commercial, industrial, institutional, the main end uses are space heating, water heating, cooking, and laundry. And the state of the art on each of those in terms of decarbonization is generally electrification. Electrification of space heating, water heating, and those can be done in tandem through combined systems. And then cooking through induction cooktops and laundry through heat pump dryers. And presuming that the washer, the hot water for the washer is coming from an electrified or decarbonized water heating system. So those are the four main end uses. I can get into some of the challenges there. I'll briefly touch on the challenges of those four, but I don't want to monopolize the whole thing because I could go on for quite a while. It's not going to be easy. The first issue is the energy burden that electrification can potentially create for the customer. Natural gas is cheap, and it's not as cheap as it used to be, but it's still cheaper than electric. And the challenge is we want folks to decarbonize these end uses, but after electrification, quite often their energy burden in terms of monthly bills goes up. Their GHG goes down, obviously. It's provided that electricity is decarbonized or less carbon intensive than the natural gas combustion. But there's those bill impacts of electricity costing quite a bit more than natural gas, even when you have very efficient electrification of those end uses. And then another issue is getting it to fit within the existing building. Footprint issues. Sometimes the equipment is larger than the natural gas counterpart that was there before. Water heaters is a specific area. And also the electric system that serves the home or business in terms of the panel capacity, the wiring capacity, the service capacity. We see we often see that an existing home will have a 100 amp panel. And if we electrify these end uses, it might still work, but the customer might have to learn not to run this and that at the same time, not run the oven and the and the dryer at the same time. And that's going to be a challenge in terms of market acceptance. I'll leave it at that, but you know, that's kind of a on the ground nuts and bolts assessment of the challenges we face with retrofitting existing buildings to electrification and decarbonization.
And somebody broke this down really elegantly for us last week. Actually, David and I were on another panel together, but said this is really a discussion around electrons and molecules. You know, where do these electrons come from, and what are the molecules that are created or generated when we make those electrons? And I think that's a really good way to really look at the conversation, because while electrons might be all the same to a certain extent, the molecules are not the same. So Patti, I want to go to you for a moment, just in your work around the LA 100 study and others. You know, how do we get to sort of this renewable grid? You know, what does that look like? Is that even, you know, sort of possible? How are you seeing other utilities dealing with that? You know, what are you sort of seeing as the path to get there?
Right. Thank you. And I really would like to build on what David said by saying, first of all, that this transition is not only does not only pose technical or technological challenges, it also poses societal and cultural and political challenges. I want to build on what you said, David, by saying that those users of ACs and stoves, etc., vary across socioeconomic status lines, and the challenges they face are also different. Just to give some examples, you want to electrify uses in LA, you need to consider that almost 50% of the population in LA are disadvantaged, meaning to start, they are faced with burdens, with the inability to afford their bills, because they need to see what they pay first: rent, transportation, electricity, health. So the burdens are multifaceted, and to that we are adding that these people need to shift to more efficient refrigerators, to electric stoves, to heating pumps. Guess what? The challenges to address that also vary with populations. For instance, you have a renter. The renter does not have the decision-making power to start with to decide whether to replace a refrigerator or a stove, because that does not belong to him or her or them. So that's a key challenge, whether they are renters or owners. Then we need to consider that many houses, not only in LA, but also in other countries, also the developed world, are not up to the standards needed to electrify many uses. Meaning, do we want to use electric vehicles? Well, we need to see whether the wiring system is up to standards. Do we want to put solar on the roof to make sure that those electric vehicles are fueled by solar? Well, some roofs are very old, cannot stand. I mean, they need to put up to standards to be able to sit solar on those roofs. So my point being that what we are working on with.
No, did we lose Patti? First it was me with the mute. Now we got Patti.
LADWP, a economic status. Sorry.
You cut out for a moment. You cut out for a moment, Patti, but you're back now. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Let me know. So again, we need to come up with a portfolio of strategies that are tailored to representative sets or beings of the population, of the communities, of the built environment characteristics. Only in that way will we be able to achieve a transition that is equitable and just. And you tell me, oh, these are just the sociologists, right, coming to tell us what to do. Well, we need to do it right, because if not, we will continue to crystallize and worsen the inequities that are at the heart of the polarization that the world, but in Europe and in the US, is experiencing. So the challenge is not only how to get the technological aspects, optimization aspects right. The challenge is also how do we do this in inclusive ways, in ways that show that we are listening, that we are considering the different needs of different sectors of the population. And that's what we are working on with LADWP. We are all tagging along, learning how to do it, how to change our mental models as well, how to do it differently. So with this, I close. I could also devote lots of hours to address the societal and cultural aspects of the challenge, but I think that with this, I can let it for my panelists to chime in. Thank you.
Thank you, Patti. And you know, you're 100% right too. I mean, we're making investments now and decisions now that are going to last a long time, especially when we talk about buildings and we talk about the grid. Michael, I want to come to you for a moment. You know, we're talking about, how do we get to, how do we get to net zero? How do we get to 100% renewable? It's ironic, the last time, sort of we saw each other was right before COVID, but how has COVID really kind of impacted this race to zero from a utilities perspective? How has this impacted your planning on your end?
Yeah, thank you for this question. First of all, I have to say we are still influenced by this COVID crisis, not as much as in 2020, but we are still in work with that. On the second, on the third wave, we call it, we had a lot of change in the society on the economical point of view as well on the social point of view. And if you are looking to the building use, operational use of buildings, of course, in 2020, we had the benefit, beside of all the troubles with the economy, that we had a CO2 impact which was lower than the years before, much lower than the years before, and this was always caused that a lot of the CO2 emissions coming from the transportation sector went really down. Nowadays, we are on the same levels like in 2019. So, but I would say there is a change in the behavior of the people, especially if I look on a city like Berlin. We do have on a political level as well on the let's say on the people level, that they want to change their transportation ways, more and more going to public transport, more and more going to bicycle riding, and more investment in the infrastructure for that. This is what I didn't expect 2 years ago, that there is a big demand now for electrical vehicles. So all of the German manufacturers now offer a wide range of different electrical cars, and so for the energy service companies, and for the grid owner and operators is a big challenge. It's a big challenge to bring in all these chargers into place, especially in cities where you do have a lot of private-owned parking lots, and the people who change from fuel-based car to electrical car, they want to have normally their own a charger. And how this is what we are facing, especially as I would say as an effect of the COVID crisis. We are quite happy about this, but we need a lot of different strategies to not to disappoint people who are now willing to invest in their own electrical cars or in their own charger. This is one thing. The other thing coming to buildings, we do have, since years, as I mentioned before in other meetings, we do have a quite strong framework that forces people more and more to building owners to do something with existing buildings, and if they erect new buildings, to fulfill very, very low or good, let's say, good standards, building codes. In the last 2 years, and this might be as well a little bit caused by COVID, people are, the landlords and as well people who rent buildings are focusing more and more on how this building is heated and what is, let's say, the efficiency of this building. Because it might be that they are more at home because a lot of them work at home because of COVID. And this is a little bit the situation. In general, I think we have to strengthen and to verify a little bit our strategies to keep this development on the right track. But we are quite happy that the focus on climate and of energy efficiency, as well on cost efficiency, is more and more in the awareness of people.
Thank you, Michael. And by the way, I do know it's evening there. If you feel like you want to have a beer or a glass of wine, don't let us stop you. We have our coffee on the other side. You can have your beer and wine on your end. That's totally fine. And I want to remind our guests today that please, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I see a really good question here around integrated renewables. But please, if you have questions, drop those in the chat. We'll make sure we get to those over the course of the conversation. So Michael was talking a little bit about strategies. We have all these things are sort of driving more use on the grid right now, from EVs to other types of technologies, while at the same time we're trying to move the grid to more renewable fuel stocks. Let's talk about that a little bit in terms of this transition from coal and natural gas to renewables, while at the same time we're adding all these other items to the grid. Maybe David, it'd be good to get your perspective for a second about some of the challenges that creates, and also I think the role efficiency plays in that, which we talked about before, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure, thanks, Ben. And actually, I would like to answer the question in the chat because I think it is. I think that's a very good question in terms of it's facade integrated solar, and that type of solar, and the question is exactly right. It does not add up to a ton. It's not going to power the entire building. And a lot of times I think we think anytime, and I'm speaking myself, not necessarily DWP on this one, we think that somebody's generating, 2 watts of power through a little solar flashlight and we have to regulate that. No, I agree personally that something like this, facade integrated solar windows, which should have a shading component as well. If it's not shading, at least a low E, low emissivity quality is something that is, if it's not being grid connected and it's being used on site for one thing or another, then yeah, there's absolutely no need to go through the whole regime of interconnection and whatnot. You can certainly find enough on-site uses that have no grid connection to harvest that energy and use it for something. It could be connected directly to lighting. It could be connected to the emergency lighting, universal power systems, UPS, uninterruptible power systems for the IT component. There's a lot of things you could use that for where it would never need to flow into the grid. All it would simply do is reduce how much is being pulled from the grid through the meter, through the interconnection. So that's perfectly reasonable. Now you put a 20 kW solar array on the roof, we might be getting into a little bit of a different situation. But certainly the facade integration is a no-brainer. Also, so the intersection of energy efficiency and all that, I think that was a part of what Ben, you asked. And I mentioned this earlier, so I'd like to elaborate a little bit more now. So we see energy efficiency as foundational to our decarbonization efforts through LA 100 by 2035. Specifically with all of the electrification we see coming, whether it's the building electrification that presents challenges, or transportation electrification that is a little bit more market ready. And I say transportation's more market ready because the economics already work in terms of pre and post energy costs. They've worked for quite a while, and with $7 a gallon gasoline here in California now, and even with rising electric rates, it still is 3 to 1 in turn, 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 in terms of the energy cost of gasoline versus electricity per mile. So, you might have a $400 a month gasoline bill, and you go to electric car, and now it's 100, 125 added to your electric bill. And then those are real numbers. We're seeing that real world performance, dramatic. This isn't 10% savings, it's 2/3 dramatic. And there's more and more product. And there's more, meaning new electric cars, and there's more and more charging opportunities, whether at home or businesses or workplace, public charging, things like that. So what that means is we're ripe for a lot of new load, right? Just through electrification, just through transportation electrification. So energy efficiency comes in and says, well, let's reduce the current load on the system so we can uptake this new load, this new transportation electrification with less infrastructure investment. In other words, less cost savings to the ratepayers, cost savings to us as a utility, as a vertically integrated utility. We care because we know that we own pretty much every step of the way that takes these costs back to customers. Example I like to use on this is what we did with street lighting in LA. We retrofitted 185,000 street lights from high pressure sodium to LED technology about 6-7 years ago. And the high pressure sodium lamps were about 1,000 watts, and the LEDs are about 500. So we cut the connected lighting load in half. We didn't pull the wiring out and put in smaller wiring. So the legacy wiring system that was there was now had capacity freed up. Well, that allowed us to start piloting putting electric vehicle chargers on individual streetlight circuits, because the wiring was now oversized for the lighting load, which gave capacity for electric vehicle chargers that we otherwise would not have been able to put on those circuits. So very simple nuts and bolts example, but that's precisely how we're looking at energy efficiency. It helps make, we're still going to have to make investments in generation, transmission, distribution, but they can be smaller. Energy efficiency helps make everything smaller, meaning less costly.
Thank you, David. And Patti, just thinking about the LA 100 study for a moment, and I dropped a link in the chat, and I see you dropped another link in the chat as well, just to link to the study, which really is a groundbreaking study here in the U.S. at least. Maybe it's been done around the world in other places, but it was really great to see those pathways to renewable. What are some of the different pathways that you sort of looked at in that study? And how do you think we get there, right, to truly get to 100%? And I know for LADWP the goal is to try to do it by 2035, but what are the pathways we use to really get there?
Well, I cannot speak about all the pathways because I was not part of that LA 100. That's why I was sending the connection to LA 100 equity strategies. And what is really important about it is that it moved the city of Los Angeles to pledge to be 100% renewable by to be 100% renewable by 2035. And what is more important is that they say we all know that all Angelinos will benefit from the transition. But for this transition to be equitable, to be just, we need to embark in the next phase of the project, which I am co-leading, where what we are doing is to work with civil society organizations that are part of our steering committee and reach out and engage with communities, with disadvantaged communities, to understand their different needs and priorities. And believe me, something I have learned about this process is that we are enriching our approach to this transition. Just a couple of examples. One is transportation. Transitioning transport to clean technologies is not only about selecting electric vehicles or vehicles fueled by biofuels. It's about understanding the different mobility needs of representative groups of the population. Some require last mile options that are affordable, such as those scooters and bikes that we are seeing on many streets of Europe and of US and Latin America, which I am aware of, right? Others might require private electric vehicles, but I think that what many are pointing to is to create public transportation options that serve the most. And I mean, I know because I studied in Germany, I did my PhD there, that Germany has done a lot to provide those. And LA is working also to provide electric buses, to provide affordable last mile options, again, to provide a portfolio of clean transport options that serve the needs of this multifaceted city. Berlin is similar. I spent a lot of my life in Berlin, and I love Berlin, by the way. Ich liebe Berlin. But the point is, that's one example of how we need to tailor the options to different users, customers. And we could go to solar, we could go to how to transition to electric stoves, which are more common in Germany, but not so common in the US. Again, we need to do this with an understanding of cultural needs, cultural preferences, also possibilities and options. So that's what we are working on, given that LA, through the groundbreaking work that our laboratory did, was able to get the elements needed to decide that, yes, that they want to go 100 clean, right, energy. But again, this needs to be done carefully. And I mean, you might say, well, yeah, okay, we know, but even for jobs, the clean energy is offering a lot of jobs, green jobs, but we need to do this transition carefully and make sure that we create workforce development opportunities for those who were working in the conventional industries, right? We need to transition them, to train them. And that's what we are working on really understanding that cities are mosaics with different users, stakeholders, customers, and that for us to do this correctly, we do not only need to get the technology right, we need to get the decision-making process right, and to do it in inclusive ways that enrich our modeling and optimization efforts. I know optimization is important, but it is not enough. And so that's what we are doing in this second phase of LA 100 equity strategies. I shared a link with you all. Let me know if you have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Patti. And yeah, I do want to get to workforce development in a moment, because I actually think that's a real critical gap for us that has been somewhat overlooked so far, and is going to only become a bigger challenge. Before we do that, Michael, I just want to get back to this pathways question for a moment. You know, how do you look at some of these pathways to decarbonize the grid and some of the challenges of how that integrates with the things that we're talking about, electrification of transportation, electrification of buildings? How are you dealing with that in Berlin? Because I'd love to get your perspective on that before we dive into some of these other issues.
I'm not sure if I understood right. So the question is to me, yes?
Yes, to you, Michael. Yeah, just about, I think we've gotten the perspective on what we're doing here in the US with LADWP, but we'd love to hear your perspective around what you're doing in Berlin in terms of these pathways for energy production and use.
Yeah. First of all, I have to say, and this is something quite clear, I know this is the same for Los Angeles, we do have quite less energy generation sites based on renewable inside the city limits. We in numbers, yes, we do have still we do have two big coal-fired sites. We do have a lot of generators on natural gas, but we do have inside the cities the share of renewables is less than 5% on the electricity we need. This is the big challenge. We do not have the space, we do not have the resources to do some big wind farms or something like that. We have to focus on energy efficiency, demand side management. This is the one thing, but we do have to bring in a lot of more solar rooftops. And this is the political challenge. We do have a so-called master plan to make Berlin as a solar city. That we want to have in 2030, 25% of the electricity coming from solar roofs. There we do have a lot of space, which is not used at the moment. But of course, we do have a lot of hurdles, a lot of obstacles at the moment to bring these installation on, to be honest, on private-owned buildings. So how to convince landlords, how to finance, how to convince residents to use this electricity and ask maybe for that electricity coming from PV systems. This is the tragedy what we do have at the moment. The government decided last year to bring in a new law which will be in place beginning starting in January 1st in 2023. Also it's to start next year. This means that everybody who erects a new building has to have a PV system. Everybody who renovates his existing building has to bring in a PV system. So what is happening right now? A lot of building owners, especially the private building owners, asking companies or organizations like us how to do. We do have a big demand, and we do have, because we talked about the COVID crisis, we do have a lot of problems to get all these systems on the market, because 90% of all these PV models are coming from China at the moment. We do not have an own industry, a strong industry in Germany since 5 years. It's all gone to Asia. So this is a challenge at the moment. As well, we have to adjust a little bit this, from my point of view, this legislation, because as Patti just underlined, we have to attract more all these different stakeholders. So the adjustment for this legislation mean as well that there is some money needed to incentivize, especially in the existing building stock. So we do have low interest guaranteed rates coming from state-owned banks and so on. This helps a little bit, but it's a big challenge. But on the other hand, it's a big chance for the city of Berlin, and our government is very strong supporting that. We do have on the operational side, of course, for the grid owner, a big challenge about that. Because if everybody is in very short time asking for a connection to the grid, because all these systems are running in parallel to the grid, you have a problem. So we have to do a lot of investment as well, especially in the existing building stock, in the electricity system in the building, which is normally 30, 40 years old. Mm-hmm. And this is, on a technical point of view, a big challenge. So, we and other guys like us, this is a big chance for us to bring climate bring the reduction of CO2 emissions really in place.
Thank you, Michael. And it's so interesting to hear, someone from Germany who had always seen really leading solar development, from way back in the day, talking about the challenges of solar deployment, solar financing. How do you get things to scale? I find that sort of fascinating, because here I always saw Germany as really leading solar for so long. So that's just interesting to hear. And I want to, there's a really good question here in the chat, and I think this is what we're going to move to next is around, really the opportunity around modernization. Michael was just hitting on that and the challenges there. This is really key. I'm a big believer that the opportunity to decarbonize our buildings is actually an opportunity for us to lift up our workforce, to decrease our long-term operating costs, and actually create a more sustainable society. That's part of why I do the work I do. And I think that's the opportunity that we're at. And this is why the work Patti's doing is so important, because if we can make this an equitable transition where we're generating this workforce of the future that is more diverse, and then also putting people in healthier environments with less emissions from natural gas, with lower long-term operating costs from renewables, that's a better situation for everyone. And so I think that's kind of what we want to aim for. I think the challenge right now, and this is where I'm going to ask some questions, is around the workforce side, because we have so much work to do. And I can share even just my experiences here in trying to electrify my home, about how unprepared the workforce is to even approach this remotely. And David, maybe I'll start with you. What do you see as some of the workforce development opportunities and challenges in this modernization and in this transition, and how are you going to try to tackle that from your end?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, this is an excellent time to gear shift into this extremely important topic. There's a huge mismatch between workforce capabilities and workforce needs, and it's such an opportunity for young folks these days. I don't want to editorialize too much, but I think we crank out, far too many four-year degrees and not nearly enough, people who can actually make stuff work. and there's these opportunities, and I'll get into what we're trying to do to make sure these are really skilled, family supporting wage opportunities are tremendous. Everything I talked about in terms of the challenges in electrification are labor intensive, other than the operating cost issue, the getting the equipment installed, upgrading the building, the retrofits, upgrading panels. So that's all labor's work. It's real hands-on work. We've got a bunch of young folks that are coming up in the world, and we're trying to slot them in, and folks are walking out of some of these very expensive colleges with $400,000 in debt into fields that they have no chance of ever being able to repay. I don't want to editorialize too much, but I mean that's problematic, and that's the degree side. And then you got the folks that aren't really on the college track at all, going into low-wage service jobs, but yet they want to work hard and they have ability, and they're not, being steered or supported in exploring these opportunities. So one thing that's a big part of what we try and do at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, both with our own workforces and encouraging external workforces in the same direction. I'll give you two examples. Something we've had in place for 10, 12 years now is the Utility Pre-Craft Trainee Program, which is an apprenticeship program for folks. And we draw from disadvantaged communities, underserved youth, at-risk youth, but also previously incarcerated. There's a huge bench of folks that are trying to get their lives back on track, that need some assistance and some direction. And that program's been in place, like I said, about 12 years. It supports a number of functions within the department for our own systems and facilities, but also our home energy improvement program, which is a program where our own workforces can go into homes and do weatherization measures, upgrades, energy efficiency. We're looking at a community solar element to that now, shared solar, and it puts them on a pathway to and gives them the training to hopefully graduate the program and get into the department. It's specifically designed to be a feeder for employment with the department, and thus far, about 2/3 of folks that have come into the program have found permanent employment with the department, which is pretty significant, given that it's not easy with the civil service requirements and other things that come with city employment. So that's a great program, but it's limited in what it can do. We've got, I mentioned earlier, we've got 4 million residents that we serve. That's 1.4 million residential accounts, 200,000 commercial accounts. Obviously, we can't serve that market at the scale it needs. So we're not just looking. We've launched a program that attempts to support living wage, family supportive employment through the eligibility requirements and the stipulations that we put in place for the customer to receive the incentive. So this program is, and I'm proud to say it's launched and it's got activity. It launched on May 1st. It's called the Comprehensive Affordable Multifamily Retrofits Program. That's CAMR, C-A-M-R, CAMR. And it's meant to be a complement to our other programs. But it targets low-income multifamily housing, 5 units and above, everything from naturally occurring multifamily housing, where it's mom and pops that own 50, 100-year-old buildings, up to no limit. I think one of the largest facilities we have in our territory that is low-income multifamily is senior housing. It's the Angeles Plaza, 1,093 units on top of Bunker Hill, about 3 blocks from our office. That is an affordable multifamily project as well, and it's actually interested to participate in the program. So with income eligibility, this allows us to really focus first on the folks and the tenants that need it the most, but then also with the eligibility requirements we put in place, the customers are required, if in order to receive the rebate at all, this isn't a kicker, this is a baseline stipulation. They hire the contractor. The rebates are very generous. They're sized to support this, but their contractor must pay prevailing wage and follow California Labor's skilled and trained workforce requirements and licensing requirements. They don't have to be a trade signatory, and that's important, and I'll explain why. But on a CAMR supported project, the CAMR scope is being paid by the rebate. They have to act like they're a trade signatory. And so there's 2 things involved with that. First, we want to encourage, obviously, we require the customer to hire contractors that participate in the level playing field. We expect we'll get a lot of folks that are hiring contractors that are already trade signatories. But what we really hope is that we'll encourage contractors that are thinking about it to give it a try. try it out. You don't have to be a signatory. You just have to act like you are in this project, and see if it fits your business model, or see if it gives you a new line of business or an opportunity to decide to become a signatory, and then see the opportunities that opens up. This program, any city project is, any government project in California is going to require a PLA. Project labor agreement. So, you're not going to be able to play in that space. You're not going to be able to play in that space if you're not, sorry, my dogs are going nuts for some reason.
It's okay, David. And since this is the network for global innovation, I want to transition to innovation for a moment, and that's innovation twofold. So Patti, going to you first, what kind of innovation do we need in this approach to workforce development and equity? Where should the innovation come from, and what should we be looking at? And then Michael, I'll probably come to you to talk about the technology innovation. So Patti, start with the people. What's the people?
Right. Yeah, let me talk about the people elements of the innovation. And that's part of what we are doing with the city of Los Angeles. We engage in listening sessions, we call them, which are nothing else but focal groups with community members and with community-based organizations. And as David already had indicated, the issue of workforce development is not only about creating new jobs, period, but understanding what existing sectors could be transitioned and trained and provided sustainable, that's what the community said, sustainable career opportunities. So what we are learning through this effort is that, and this is also based on work on how to transition away from coal, and I know Europe has a lot of experience also on that, from coal to cleaner energy sources. So what we learned through this bottom-up approach was that we need targeted job training opportunities for communities. And when I mean targeted, I mean not only training that is suitable to the solar or to wind or to electric vehicles, but also training that is suitable to the communities that need to be trained. And their needs are different, and their challenges are different. Also, what was suggested by us and what we also proved through reading key literature was that we need to support strong labor standards and practices, meaning for this transition to be equitable, we need to make sure that the labor sector is able to be organized and to have their interests taken care of course, together with the interests of the firms and the utilities that are hiring them. And that means that there needs to be a negotiation process. And we also learned that we need to expand successful programs. David already referred to those two that were also mentioned by communities. Let me just refer to 4 key suggestions that we have gathered from our engagement process. It was suggested that to improve the city contracting standards, because they have a huge influence in hire and labor standards, and make sure that these ensure quality jobs for, in this case, Angelinos. And what they mean by quality jobs is really longer-term career opportunities, such as those that many workers in Europe and in the US were able to benefit from during the post-war times. They really miss those times. So they also want that a more structural, more targeted effort is used to develop hiring practices for construction, operation, and maintenance of many things: distributed energy systems, infrastructures, Again, you guys were already mentioning the issue of how we call it, even having an electric vehicle at home requires many activities, many supports for which we need to train our labor force. And last but not least important, it is fundamental, crucial to develop collective bargaining agreements and workforce development and training opportunities in relation to the energy transition. And as we are seeing from this conversation, there are many elements to this transition. One is, okay, if we are to move to solar and wind and you name it, who will provide all those services? Who will be trained to provide those? If we are to upgrade the buildings, because this is a buildings panel, who will help us do that? Are we training the workforce that will provide those maintenance, repair, retrofitting services? Those are not trivial questions. Those are huge questions. And I know from being a student in Germany that Germany has the Realschule, right? The opportunity for students to be trained to become blue-collar workers that offer opportunities for them to provide their children a better life, for them to pursue their lives with dignity. And again, there are many other things to say, but this is a huge area of work, of investment, of workforce development, of making everyone happy if we do it right, but also of polarizing society if we don't do it right. So I'm glad we are having this conversation because you guys are at the front of this and we need to do it right. And I'm so excited to support you as a social scientist, hand in hand with all these technical and amazing experts we have here in the conversation. Like, for instance, my two panelists.
Thank you, Patti. And Michael, go to you to close again, just looking at innovation. You know, what kind of innovation are you seeing on the technical side or on the grid side that's going to help enable this future? And then we'll open it up to some questions to the audience before we close. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. A little bit to the actual German perspective. Regarding the energy transition, we are in this very, very special situation. It's a huge chance and a challenge as well, as I mentioned, mostly driven by the Russian war in Ukraine. Because I guess you know that Germany, nearly 55% of our natural gas imports coming from Russia. So this was before this February this year. Now everything's changed, and everybody, mostly as well the people who are not very in favor for renewables, they want to run out natural gas imports from Russia yesterday. So not tomorrow, yesterday. So there's a high dynamic, not only a political dynamic and a political challenge, as well as a dynamic in the market. What does it mean? From my point of view, and I'm really, really often asked what to do right now from landlords to tenants, they are asking what to do right now. From a technical point of view, we have to bring in more and more, let's say, smart metering, more and more control system to reduce, especially in Germany, we are 40% are caused by building sector. Inside, 60 or nearly 65% are caused by the heating sector. So now we are in summer, and some people relax about that. But if we are going to winter, we have to be better in the building sector to reduce the demand side. There we do have a lot of technical innovation, which which is available to bring this in. As I mentioned, a better monitoring, a better control system. This is what we really need. And of course, the on-site generation systems are now really asked. So I talked about photovoltaics. Now I'm wondering about, but we are talking about right now in these days about combined systems, PV and solar thermal, to bring together on the roofs. Of course, there are a lot of challenges because it's heavyweight, but in some residential areas and in some buildings, this might be a solution. I never thought that this would become, but now with this price level coming from natural gas sector, this is suitable. We just bring more PV systems on facades. This is as well something which is coming, and other systems, as David mentioned, we have to bring in. Now this is my dog in the back. Yeah, I do have David. I do have as well a dog, and I guess my
dog's like 10 years old, so he's just sleeping right now. That's
okay. It's really too late for the postman, because normally he's like that when the postman is coming.
It's the beer delivery service, Michael. That's what it is. We understand. Yeah.
I'm sorry about that, but I can't manage it. So if we are talking about heat pumps, we do have a strong development now in the technology of heat pumps. And if we are talking about the existing building stock, to bring in place an electric-driven heat pump, it's not so easy, because the system doesn't fit to the temperature which is needed by the system. The high temperature which is needed normally can bring a heat pump. So we do have a development there that the new designed heat pumps could be covered at. This is something what I see, which is now on these days, because the opportunity to buy natural gas or liquefied natural gas on a level of what is the level at the moment? Let me think about. We are talking about 120 euros per megawatt hour. And this is it's amazing. We came from 20 euro per megawatt hour. So this is where we are, and this offers us another good chance to step ahead in the energy transition, especially in the heat sector. And what Patti said. Yes, we do have in Germany a very good, from my point of view, education system around jobs, but we are suffering as well for specialists in this area. So the newest numbers the government in Germany brought out was we around about 500,000 people are needed in this market. 500,000 people. So. Therefore, this is where the shortage at the moment is. As I mentioned as well, we are the products are often coming from Asia, so this is another shortage. But the human resources. This is the biggest challenge, I would say.
No, that is a big challenge, and I was speaking with someone last week, and I think the number they said was 70% of our mechanical engineering workforce is aging out in the next 10 years, which is pretty phenomenal when you think about that. That's crazy. Well, I know we're a little past our time to open up things for questions, but we've answered some of the questions along the way, so that's probably okay. Are there any other questions here? Either from the audience, feel free to drop those in the chat, or from you, Fred, or any other panelists to each other. I know we just have a few more minutes here before we close.
I just have a comment, Ben. I put on the chat the scenarios that LA100 put together, because I was not able to answer, that I didn't have it so fresh in my head. So whoever is interested can see a very nice visual of the scenarios that LA100 used to inform the decision to transition to 100% clean energy.
Thank you, Patti. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to comment on a comment in the chat as well by Robert regarding project labor agreements. Yeah, we completely agree. Project labor agreements are one tool to require living wage, family supportive employment opportunity. These aren't just jobs; these are careers. And not always is the PLA the right route. It is, if we're hiring, the department hires out a lot of contracting work, and of course we have PLA requirements. But for incentive programs, like I mentioned with the CAMR program, the Affordable Multifamily Retrofit program, we don't hire the contractors directly, so we wouldn't do a PLA in that instance. But we require the customers to treat their contractors like they are under a PLA, whether they are or aren't. And we have mechanisms in place to ensure that. There's tracking tools. We've actually brought on a tracking tool that is used by other city departments to ensure PLA compliance. Timesheet review, checking the pay scale, inside wireman rates, the skilled and trained requirements, licensing, et cetera. So there's multiple ways to get there, but in essence, yes, absolutely. As we do this green transition, which will be labor intensive, pretty much by definition, we should make sure that we have requirements in place, whether PLAs or eligibility requirements for incentives, tax breaks, grants, whatever the incentive mechanism is, has those strings attached.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, David. Appreciate you answering that question. Is there any other comments from the panelists? Fred, anything else you wanted to hit on quickly?
I have some observations. First of all, it's been a terrific conversation. I've learned a lot about it. And, one impression is it's, to solve these problems, you always got to get to the nuts and bolts level. You have to look how a building is used, and then address it in that way. Or, street lamps, who would have thought that, by making street lamps more efficient, that you could then put a charger that then has a impact. So it's really, you got to talk about stuff on a nuts and bolts level. It's difficult to do because it's a very complex problem, aren't they? They're all interconnected. You can't just talk about the built environment without talking about transportation, without talking about the load. And so it's really pretty interesting. To me, it's as Patti is so aptly stated, it's one thing to solve these problems on a nuts and bolts level, but you also have to look at solving these problems for different audiences, different users. I mean, it's very, very different. And it's so important to bring everybody along, especially as we know, as we're learning more and more about the stratification of our society and the impact that has. And, we need to change that as fast as we possibly can on all fronts. I keep talking about, global and the impact of that. And, Michael just, highlighted again, the war in Ukraine and the impact on natural gas prices and what an opportunity that has to speed the transition into more sustainable areas. And perhaps to me, most importantly, all of these huge challenges, and they are huge challenges, they also represent huge opportunities for people to get new jobs and to solve these problems in a way that they have a family supporting income, and at the same time trying to solve these really important challenges. And so I think this is, to me, it's been a really fascinating discussion. I've learned a lot, and I could go on, but I'll hit the pause button. And for some reason, my dogs are not barking. So,
Thank you, Fred. Well, I think that probably brings us to our close here. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and Really appreciate everyone's time today, and thank you, Fred, for the offer to participate in this panel. It's been great, and I guess the sort of the good and the bad news for all of us is there's no shortage of work to do for the next 10 or 20 years to really get to where we want to be. So job security is one thing we definitely have going forward as long as we stay committed to this work. So thank you, everyone, for your diligence in that, and I will see you out there in the trenches making it happen. So.
And please keep in touch with NGIN on our LinkedIn or YouTube for the upcoming roundtables. And of course, if you haven't had a chance to see all of this, the video of this will be posted on all of our social media channels. Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you.
Thank you for the rest of your day and the rest of your evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I hope to see you
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
soon.
Good. Bye-bye.